WBSM presents Brian's Beat with Brian Thomas. Streaming live on WBSM.com and the WBSM app. Call 508-996-0500. Send us app chat messages and open line voicemails using the WBSM app. Now, Brian Thomas.
Seatbelts, everyone! Please let this be a normal field trip. With a friend? No way!
Cruising on down Main Street, you're relaxed and feeling good. Next thing that you know, you'll see it. Pushing my neighbor, surfing on the Soundwave, swinging through the stars. Take a left at Joey Teston, take your second right past Mars on the magic school bus. Navigator nostril, climb on the magic school bus. Make a plane turn to our magic school bus. Drop the river of love on the magic school bus. Such a fine thing to do. So strap your bones right to the seat. Come on in and don't be shy. Just to make your day complete. You might get baked into a pie on the magic school bus. Step inside, it's a wilder ride. Come on, ride on the magic school bus.
Hour two of Brian's Beat. Glad to have you with me today. Brian's Beat, the only show born at the apex of freedom, entrepreneurship, and nomadism. Hour one, we got into quite a few things, in particular, this whole idea of the Healy administration. And once again, it's one of those novel ideas because, to the best of my knowledge, no other state has proposed this. In fact, according to Axios, the state of Massachusetts, aims to offer up to 6 months of housing assistance through Medicaid, estimating that $2 billion in federal reimbursements will come back to the Commonwealth. Could. It doesn't mean that they will come back to the Commonwealth. It doesn't mean that they shall come back to the Commonwealth. $2 billion. We're a state already seeing fewer and fewer tax revenues come in. I don't want to say we're at the brink of broke, but we're pretty darn close to it. Anyway, that's out there for you. The Brian's Beat quote of the day, coming from the friendly folks over at monthlyfeerx.com. If you're spending less than $20 a month for prescription drugs, great. If not, monthlyfeerx.com might be a good option for you. And the Brian's Beat quote of the day from Dr. Seuss. Only you can control your future. Only you can control your future. Speaking of the future, in a few future minutes, we're going to be joined by Chris Cotter of the New Bedford School Committee. I reached out to him earlier. You may recall last week, we brought up on the program, we being yours truly, that Diamond Volk over in Fall River is going to be opening up a school-based health center or health clinic. And it will serve all of the students that go to Volk. And apparently, there's no charge. Now, you got to be saying to yourself, what do you mean there's no charge? You mean doctors, nurses, psychiatrists? None of them are gonna charge? The story goes on to say, Mayor John Mitchell said back in 2022 that the New Bedford High School will have a health center, and it would be built using 2 sets of federal funds. That's the quote, 2 sets of federal funds. Something that we're not going to cost us anything to establish. And then that might be true. Might not cost a red cent to establish it. It's coming from the federal money. But what happens when that federal money dries up? And we're seeing it. You know, a lot of the COVID relief money has started to dry up. I'm dealing with a couple of schools, more than a couple of schools right now, that are now facing state receivership because of the fact that they used the COVID money to keep people employed, and now all of a sudden there's no more money, and they've been told, if you can't come up with an escape plan by March 15th, boom. Boom. So that's what's going to happen. Okay, so that's out there for you if you'd like to comment on it. Why am I bringing it up again? Well, cost, of course, is important. The other part of this is what's going to be going on inside of those health centers. Oh, yes, somebody might need a Tylenol, but what if somebody is confused about her or his or her or his gender? Does this health center help in this particular case? Well, a political leader might tell you no. But state law says YES. Who do you think is going to win until the law is changed? If you go to New Bedford Light, they have a story that came out earlier this week by Colin Hogan. New Bedford top state in homeschoolers. Yeah. More homeschoolers in New Bedford than Worcester, Fall River, Boston. How about that? New Bedford. How many? 298 students. Now, is that a king's ransom? Absolutely not. But you know what it does do? Eventually, it starts to eat away at the money that normally would come in on those cherry sheets from the state. Why? Because you don't have that student population anymore. And you couple the 298 students at last year's count, last year's school year, that were homeschooled. Then you add in those New Bedford students that decided to go to like Bishop Stang or a private school, or they went to TECA, the online school, or another virtual school. All of a sudden, you have a lot more than 298 students that are no longer walking the hallways of New Bedford schools. I have no problem with that. I think that's great. But the new superintendent of schools, he's not crazy about it. I can only imagine what Mayor Mitchell must be thinking, and we will find out what Chris Cotter has to say about it when we talk to him in just a bit. 508-996-0500 is how you get onto the program today. Let's hear from you. Hello.
Good morning, Brian.
Good morning, Brian.
Can I ask a frivolous, non-off-topic question of you?
Frivolous?
It might be frivolous, yes.
Frivolous to me?
Yep. Yep.
Me? Frivolous?
Maybe you can answer it, maybe you can't.
Huh.
Maybe you don't know.
What is your question?
Here's my question. For many, many years, you had a gentleman that would introduce, your programs and stuff. I believe the gentleman was blind and still did this. And now there's been a change. Did something happen to that gentleman?
I don't. That's above my pay grade.
Okay. All right. That's all I wanted, because I enjoyed the guy and seemed like, an average guy that was trying to get by and all that sort of stuff.
Maybe he is. I don't know.
Yeah, I know, but I was just wondering for the reason of getting rid of him. It gave your station a certain, uniqueness, having this gentleman do the announcing, I think, and now you got...
As opposed to this guy?
Well, what you got is kind of like, I don't know, to me, off the shelf. Let's put this in here, Like the other guy was more of a unique type of person, I thought. But, okay.
I don't know either from Adam, but I appreciate it.
Okay, all right.
Have a great one.
Good to hear you.
All right, thank you. I appreciate the call. 508-996-0500. Hello.
What's up, big dog?
Ruff, ruff.
I thought I'd throw you for a loop.
Did you?
No, you did. No, absolutely not. You're on the ball.
No, I'm on a chair, thank you.
Well, it depends on the circus.
Thank you.
Could be on a ball. Yeah, we talked about this actually last week. We touched base on this, and now you're bringing it up again. And
you're hating on me now.
No, absolutely not. It's just it's so important that it definitely needs to be repeated consistently and on multiple programs. When we have a top-down government and the municipalities are asking the state for money, and then the state says, sorry, we're going to be left holding the bag, and we can't raise taxes to fund it, right? So now we have an unfunded liability, or we're going to start to eliminate programs. And we talked about this last week. Once you instill a program in the community, in society for a certain amount of time, it becomes extremely hard to get rid of. It's like, a parasite that just continuously sucks off the life of the other. And eventually that's what happens is you're going to have the state's going to dry up with the funding to the municipality, and the municipalities are going to have to make a choice. And we know the politicians, they don't like to cut programs. They like to cut taxes because that's always a bonus for the people. Everybody likes to have their taxes cut, but nobody likes to have their program cut. And when you have that type of situation, you end up with higher debt, which was what we see at the federal government level,
and the state.
Or we have very upset people at the local level.
Yeah.
And it's just something it's a perpetual problem that we can't seem to get rid of until you get people in office that are willing to make really hard decisions to cut things out. And I'm talking the big stuff, the big name stuff from Medicaid. People don't want to touch that. And here at the state level, you're never going to have a politician in Boston willing to get rid of that state program, and you're never going to have anybody at the federal level willing to do that at the federal level and cut it across the country.
Well, I think we can thank Mitt Romney for the Medicaid expansion with Romney Care back in 2007, 6.
Yeah. I mean, even that has its roots in the Heritage Foundation, which is a libertarian or at least a conservative think tank. It's just a lot of different issues that we have going on. And I kind of call it the true Santa Claus theory. So you have the Republicans who like to cut taxes, and you have the Democrats who like to create programs, and neither of them like to, ensure that they're solvent. You have tax cuts, but the Republicans will cut your taxes, but they won't cut the subsequent programs to eliminate the spending to go along with it.
Because
right? So
cutting the program cuts the vote.
Right, exactly. So you cut your taxes, but then they'll fund the program by borrowing money. And that's how the Republicans have been doing it. And the Democrats will just create programs, and they'll try and raise taxes, but they'll never raise it enough to actually fund the entire program.
They raise it. The game is to raise it just enough that you have to come back and ask for more.
Exactly. So, hey, on another note, before I have to let you go, this is something that I've actually been bringing on multiple programs, Chris's program, Barry's program, with the looming primary coming up on Tuesday, and you have Donald Trump going to be at the top of the ticket, most likely going to win.
And probably the bottom of the ticket, too.
Right.
He's going to be the ticket.
So this is the issue, and I heard some other hosts actually bring this up, where there are people out there, high-level ranking Republicans, who are afraid that him being at the top of the ticket is going to hurt down-ballot races like they did with Jeff Deal, and you had it with different other races across this country. And he's a perpetual loser. right?
Jeff
He
Deal?
lost in 28. No. Donald Trump. Donald Trump is a perpetual loser. He lost in 2018. He lost in 2020, and he lost again in 2022 with his endorsements. He had a lot of endorsements that in close races, if he didn't endorse and it was a normal Republican, not a Trump Republican, endorsed Republican, the Senate would have went with the Republicans, right? The Senate would have went with the Republicans if Georgia didn't run a Trump Republican, if Pennsylvania didn't run a Trump Republican. See, the problem is he's a poison. His policies may be popular, but he himself on the top of the ticket will hurt down ballot because he's a bad individual.
Well, I'll tell you what, since I don't follow the Republicans that much, I know that they're there, and eventually, if I can't find a libertarian to vote for, I will vote in that direction. But Ken's here, so I'm going to let him respond to that, okay?
Yeah. I'd love to hear it. Yeah.
Well, I think Donald Trump has built a few of the foundation blocks that cause his negativity. But, and what he's saying is what Americans who don't like him, and there's many of them, he's up against the most hostile press percentage-wise. That's not even close to to any other president, the way the press has treated him. His policies are popular because people want to see them in place, and once they're out of place, like we see at the border, it's chaotic, it's worse. So it's too bad. How do we get his policies onto another individual? Well, you can't.
You got to get another individual that wants to do that.
No, you can't in the cycle. It's either more of Biden or more of Trump. So people are going to be stuck with that choice. And I have a feeling like he will most likely win the general. I would say. I would say he's slightly favored.
Who is he?
I'm saying Trump. Trump will most likely win in the general, but what's going to happen is you're going to lose the House. You could potentially lose the House if he starts endorsing House Republicans or House candidates that are aligned with him. And just like, we've seen it in the past, 2018, 2020, and 2022. And then you're going to see governors also. You're going to see governors fall, and that will hurt down ballot chances. So he gets the White House, but he hurts everybody else down below.
See, I think he's actually there's going to be a red wave of a sort, in 24. But I think, Chris, you're right. And in the midterms, I think you'll probably see some Trump fatigue again.
We were promised a red wave in 2022 and 2018, and it never formulated.
You're right.
Because
you're absolutely right. But nobody lost more seats as a president. Nobody lost more seats than Barack Obama. I didn't hear him defined as a perpetual loser, but
no. I'm saying
that was the second term, right?
I'm saying he's a perpetual loser because he hasn't won in almost 10 years, right? He hasn't won in 2016. He didn't win in 2016, right? So you're talking 8 years. So you're talking 2018. His candidates lost. So what I'm saying is in the Republican primaries, you could have had a Chris Doty, right, or a Jeff Deal, and the Republicans in Massachusetts picked Jeff Deal because he was endorsed by Trump. That helped his prospects. Where I believe if we picked Chris Doty, we wouldn't have Healy because Chris Doty is more in line with Charlie Baker. And Charlie Baker was one of the most popular governors in the United States at the time.
I don't know that either candidate was going to win. Maura Healey, just the name brand, her success as an attorney general. If you're a Democrat, you really liked her. If you're Republican, you're in the minority anyway. I doubt any one of them was going to beat her. But yeah, he was definitely more palatable. Jeff Deal doesn't know how to run an election.
Right. I think that's the biggest problem with Donald Trump being at the top. We're gonna see a Republican White House with Donald Trump because I'll put my money on him. But I want to say that you could actually see a Democratic House because it's so close right now anyway. Because he has a tendency to pick the most fringe, the most outspoken and outlandish individual. And that doesn't help his prospects with the independent, the average suburban mom and dad who really don't pay attention to politics except for on election day. And they just pick the guy or the woman who's kind of the most moderate. Yeah, and
but I think we've seen. I don't
think we're going to see that.
I think we've seen some improvement in the Trump-esque ability to fight the media and do it in a more cerebral way. I think DeSantis, Carrie Lake, people like that, I think they're more articulate, a little more careful with their words than Donald Trump. I think you're starting to see an evolution of the Trump-esque sort of approach to dealing with the hostile media, and hopefully that progresses. But, he's a New York builder. He talks like a New York builder. I'm from Brockton, Mass. I understand him. I had no intention to vote for him. As the debates went on in the Republican primary, he's the only guy up there saying what I want to see done. I reluctantly pulled the switch for him, and of course I was going to pick him over Hillary. But like you're saying, it's not so much his policies. If we're all being honest, his policies weren't so bad for America. But it's the tip of the spear. He's so abrasive.
Thank you much for your call. I'm going to take one more. We've got a break. We have Chris Cotter, who's going to come up in just a bit. By the way, Ken, good morning.
How are you?
What are you doing awake?
I don't know. I had to bring my daughter to her color guard practice. Big. They have a big competition today at Dartmouth High.
So at least they're home. They're not traveling off to Ohio or anything like that?
Well, they will be, but they were in Salem a couple of weeks ago. We went up there and watched that, and it's pretty impressive.
I remember when my kids played on the football team, it was very impressive. I don't know how to compare this band to the bands of the early 2000s, but they all seem to be tremendous.
You were talking about 200 kids out of the New Bedford schools?
298.
That's 14,000 a student that is in the budgets. That's about
2.5%.
That's about $4 million.
Yeah. Oh, I know.
Wow.
I know. Look, that's just the home school. We're not talking about the private schools. We're not talking about the virtual schools, that folks that aren't going to those schools.
298. Okay. Well, let's say it's
rounded off to 300.
Say it's 14,000 a student, which is probably low.
Mm-hmm.
Right? 4.172 million.
Well, little do-re-mi. 508-996-0500. Hello.
Hey, Brian and Ken. How you doing?
Excellent. How are you?
Not bad. The last caller, several times he's called in and over the weeks and said that down ballot is lost to Trump and keeps using the midterms as an example. But the midterms are lost not by Trump. It was lost because of the abortion issue. And the abortion issue was an issue with the Supreme Court, which had nothing to do with Trump, endorsing down ballot people. It had to do with the fact that the abortion issue brought out the Democrats and they worked the ground game again like they are very good at doing. So,
I always ask this question too, caller. Would Donald Trump have lost if there wasn't a COVID shutdown in this extraordinary period of time in America?
Well, who knows?
You mean the China virus? I don't know. I think it would have been close, but I think that
it was close. It was.
The Democrats worked the system and changed the playing field and how the rules are played, and the Republicans complain and point at it that they're not in front of the game. So that's really what's going on in politics. And all of a sudden we have paper ballots. Everybody's got paper ballots. My son's paper ballot showed up, and I could have easily voted for him. He wouldn't have known. I don't even know if I voted for him with his paper ballot, if they would have been able to, because he lives in Cambridge, whether he went to the polling place, if they would have known that he checked it, he had already voted. So I think there's a lot of corruption in the system, and when you get to Massachusetts and the issues you originally brought up, which had to do with finances and the fact that we might be heading for bankruptcy. I mean, this is a 100% Democratic state, except for Sean O'Connell and a handful of Republicans that got voted in. So they tend to, spend the budget or blow through the budget. They're not fiscally responsible anymore. That used to be part of the job. And now I'm sure they're going to look at other sources of income, like this new allowing cities to create their own taxes. Maybe they'll start to go after 401ks. Like, you're not allowed to retire in Massachusetts. We're going to tap into your 401ks. I don't know. I mean, any place that there's wealth, they're going to attack the wealth. And that's wealth that's been built by individuals. So
they're really forced to, though, because the policies that they've set for the state and for the state's future requires a lot of money. And I don't think they care how they get it. So they're going to cause an exodus.
I don't. What do you mean? It's already happening.
Yeah.
It's already happening.
Hey,
happening within the schools. Happening with people and businesses packing up their bags and getting out. Hey,
I just came back from South Carolina with my wife, and we toured over 50 homes. So trust me, I'm on the way out.
Ooh, okay. Thanks for the call.
All right, well, listen, you have a good weekend.
You too. 508-996-0500. Chris Cotter when we come back. I like that guy. 508-996-0500. We have been talking a lot the past couple of weeks about the idea of a school-based health center at New Bedford High School. Mayor Mitchell, I don't know why he brought it up, but apparently a couple of years ago he did bring it up in an article. And apparently New Bedford High is going to have one. Exactly when, I don't know. Maybe Chris Cotter knows. Chris is joining us this morning. He is a member of the New Bedford School Committee, has been is his third time around now. Good morning, Chris Cotter. How are you?
I'm good, Brian. How are you, sir?
Winging and wanging, as I like to say. And Ken Pittman's with us, too.
Morning, Chris.
Morning, Ken. How are you?
I'm well, thanks.
So let's start here. This whole idea about a school-based health center. You wrote to me that, I'm going to put it in my own words, but I think you will agree, that you have a few problems with this.
That is correct, yep.
Why don't you enlighten us?
Well, I mean, again, it hasn't been a formal issue that we've discussed in great detail as a school committee. I know that it was brought up back probably over 2 years ago when it was first brought up. And I'm not really sure where we stand on it, other than you mentioning the fact that it was brought up the other day in a conversation with the mayor and a media outlet that Diamond opened theirs. And
well, they're supposed to be opening it this month. Diamond.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't really have, I just have some issues with it, but that's, a discussion to be had. And I'm not really sure where we stand, if we stand, other than I know that it was brought up 2 years ago.
So you have some issues. Are they monetary issues? Are they what's going to happen behind screened doors? What kind of issues do you have?
Yeah, I mean, my first issue is what you said, the latter. I'm concerned because, again, I think in my opinion, I think we're pushing parents out by allowing health access to underage children. And I want definitive answers as far as, what's the protocol on children going to the health center without parental notice. Are parents going to be notified? If so, or if not, then that is something that I have some serious concerns with.
I read from Mary Ellen Siegler's article at Massachusetts Family Institute. You sign a parental consent notice whether or not you want your child to use that facility, but then unless you've read the fine print, that kid is subject to whatever else is on that piece of paper. I would want to know what's on that paper.
And again, I'm not, without going into, a lot of details, because again, I don't have them. But I do have some concerns for that specific reason. And I do know that, one specific comment that was made 2 years ago when I went back in my notes is that, the mayor made a comment that, we would actually coordinate transportation to the facility for New Bedford students from schools.
That's right. That is in the state law too.
Doesn't a nurse have to get a parent's letter if they want to give that student a Tylenol?
Again, in my opinion, Ken, yes. But those are some concerns that, I brought up 2 years ago, and I wasn't provided those answers because, again, I think it was in the beginning stages. So those are concerns that I do have, that I don't want kids being treated for anything or having discussions medically for anything without parental consent. I think that's blocking parents out, and that's a concern that I've had for quite a while now.
Well, thank God you're bringing light to this. I mean, this is very concerning.
Well, I would say this, according to what's gone on in other clinics, kids have been transported for gender, what do you call that? Gender
reassignment?
Well,
transitioning?
The knowledge part of it.
Indoctrination?
Well, learning more about it. I don't know if it's...
I didn't win a prize yet, I guess 3 times. I'm out.
I don't know that it's definitely indoctrination, but parents aren't alerted that their child may have these tendencies, may want to switch.
No, they're under the impression that their children are being trained to deal with the world as an adult through math and science and history and all these other things.
Not in that health class. But anyway, I mean, those are definite concerns. Let's go on to the homeschooling thing. Actually, Ken was doing a little mathematics. 298 students last year decided that they wanted to be homeschooled in the city of New Bedford, and New Bedford tops the state in homeschoolers. Any thoughts?
Well, I did do some research, my own, and I did get some answers that were a little more palatable for me on a public school level. Is specifically is that the ironic part is the article that was written, although it doesn't specifically state New Bedford public schools, it does include, which I found kind of suspect in the article because of course it doesn't allude to that, but that's not just New Bedford public schools. Those are students that also leave charter schools that opt for homeschooling, for example, Alma or Global Charter. Mm-hmm. So those numbers are also in that high number. So
it's 198 in entirety? Are you saying the homeschooling and the charter school number in entirety is 198?
No, it's 298.
298.
Yeah. That's what I'm being told. So the numbers, because I guess the families have to go to the public school system to be counted under DESE. So Charter and Alma, although they don't have to report specifically that their kids are leaving their schools for homeschooling, those revert back to the resident city of those students.
Chris, how much is the average student, not special needs, not English immersion or people that need to be taught English, how much is the average student, what is the cost per student to the city?
Honestly, off the top of my head.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. Yeah, I didn't want to put you on the spot. I don't know if you know it off the top of your head.
No, that I don't. I'm sorry.
Okay.
But again, I mean,
if you use a figure of 14,000, what did you come up with, Ken?
That's about 4.1 million, and it means that. So what we get an average of, let's say, 25 kids in a class, right? So
I would say that.
So the class costs. That one class costs the taxpayers $350,000 a year, about $1,944 a day, right? If you lose, one or two of that 25, that's a significant reduction in costs, I would think.
Oh, as far as funding, absolutely.
Well, so if I guess we have to look at it from the standpoint that at best, the number will stay the same. If you're talking about losing $4 million a year, correct?
Yeah.
Well, where do you start thinking about some trimming?
As I mentioned the other day, Brian, I don't want to, throw into a conversation a trimming issue until I'm faced with having to be there, because again, there are many different issues, many different areas that I would have to see as far as where we're going to be having to cut numbers. And again, that's just not, I need to see from the district where the numbers are coming from.
I mean, it's a sort of unfair to if you're planning as a school committee member or planning the school budget. It's a little difficult when you think parents can take their kids out at any point, and people can come into the city at any point and just put their kids in the school system. There's no way of planning for that budget-wise.
Especially here in New Bedford.
Yeah.
And I, again, not that I'm, trying to dissuade the conversation from the New Bedford Public Schools, but in all fairness, I found it interesting that Dartmouth jumped from roughly 40 kids homeschooling to now 80. So, I mean, you're talking a smaller district, and that's a 50% jump in itself, and that's it's a smaller district in the suburban area.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the homeschool issue was just not a New Bedford public school issue, which is where, I felt the article was a little one-sided, throwing the dig towards New Bedford public schools. When in reality, the article itself didn't really mention much about New Bedford in and of itself, other than
I think it was mostly a homeschooling article, but the fact is, New Bedford still has the most students that are homeschooled out of any other city or town. When you look at big city Boston, big city Worcester, Springfield, not necessarily big city Fall River, but a city to compare it to down here. I would agree with you that the figure doubled for Dartmouth, but when you're number one on the list, you're number one on the list.
So let me ask you this. Is it possible that, and when I say radical, I just mean radical compared to the traditional teaching platform of science, history, math, right? So parents looking at a more radical agenda for the kids to deal with social changes, all the stuff that we're dealing with, and the fact that we just came out of the COVID shutdown where people have transitioned themselves to work from the home in a much bigger, a much larger percentage of the workforce is still working from home. Is that influencing the homeschooling?
In my opinion, yeah, I do. I think, a lot of that does have a lot to do with it. I do believe that, as it was stated, the health concerns, people are still concerned with COVID. In my opinion, it's really not something that we really should be documenting or, watching for and recording as we were back in a couple of years ago. But I think in some families' minds, that's one of the concerns.
But the employers are comfortable in many cases now with letting people work from their homes.
They are. And unfortunately, there are some employers that are now going back to getting their employees into the workplace instead of working at home. So you kind of have, 6 of one, half dozen of another, where some are okay with having people work from home, but then you have other corporations that are saying, you know what, we need to utilize and see our workforce in the buildings. And, I know that for a fact where, some companies have had their employees not working in the buildings for 15 years, and now all of a sudden they're being required to go back into the workplace.
Well, I think that's happening all over. But the schools are a different thing because you guys get paid to have the butts in the seats. Mm-hmm. And as we see, and I think you're going to see higher numbers leaving the schools for various reasons. Ken has brought up a couple, but, you've got bullying that is still going on. You have fights every once in a while. You have the academic agenda, this whole thing that we were just talking about before with the school-based health center. It doesn't have to be one thing, but in total, when you start adding it up, all of a sudden you go from 125 to 235 to 298, all the way up to 400. I don't know that it's going to stop anytime soon. In fact, I'm not expecting it to.
Yeah, no. And again, the ironic part, and again, the article certainly doesn't pull that up either, but, many cities and towns in Mass are losing enrollment. But if you look at New Bedford Public Schools enrollment, we're actually increasing. And, and I'll use the New Bedford High School numbers as an example. Where our enrollment is increasing. So is that the influx of people coming into the city, moving into the city? What's the reasoning behind that instead of...
Well, what's the percentage of new students that require English immersion?
Again, that I don't have off the top of my head.
It's probably a factor.
I'm sure that is probably higher than most districts, absolutely.
Yeah.
Probably not too many people moving down from Newton. Chris Carter, I want to thank you so much for coming on to the program today.
Anytime, Brian.
Have a great one.
All right, thanks, guys.
No problem. 508-996-0500. Got to take a break. I see you there on the phone. I'm going to get... What up? Caller, I've got a minute for you. Go ahead.
All right, Brian, I'll make it very quick. And Ken, Chris Carter should have the numbers right at his fingertips. He should know how much it costs. I heard from a radio station on Cape Cod, Tim Dunn was doing the news there, costing $22,000 per student. Last week, covering for you, Ken, was Paul Santos. He had his guest, Miss Murphy, special ed teacher at New Bedford High School. And when I asked her how many children there don't know how to speak English, she said it was 40% of the students there. They had a foreign language as their first and English as a secondary.
I saw that in writing, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so we're getting all this, and Chris Carter doesn't know. He better get to do his homework, because when we ask him about figures and numbers,
I bet he
we
could
need
have
to
come
know
close.
this.
I think he wanted to get it right. I'm sure he knows basically what it costs, but he didn't offer a figure, but that wouldn't hold that against him.
That's what it is. A lot of illegal aliens coming here. I call them foreign nationals, and nobody
You don't
seems
like
to know
Biden's term? Biden calls them newcomers.
Yeah, he calls them newcomers. Yeah, well, I want him. You should be at one of his palatial palaces, being flown around by helicopters.
There you go. Hey, thanks for the call.
All right,
I really
guys.
appreciate
Take
it.
care now.
Last one here. Hello.
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 I was in the car driving, so I couldn't comment on that previous caller about someone with Trump's thoughts who else to vote for. And I just want to say Robert Kennedy Jr. wants to close the border, doesn't want digital currency, and wants the same thing. So just in case they torture Trump more than they are now, you always have him as an independent.
Okay.
True.
I mean, still not my cup of tea, but I hear what you're saying. I still think there's a lot of Democrat in him.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, runs in the family.
Well, yeah, but he does have his own ideas, too.
Yeah, that's true.
And I've been reading a lot about him and things like that.
He's got an eclectic platform. I mean, he's an anti-vax guy, which the Democrats don't like.
No, he's anti-mandate. He only wants to make vaccines safe for children.
That is more accurate. You're right.
So, but everybody I talked to, I said, "Oh, what about Kennedy Jr.?" "Oh, he's a nut. He's anti-vax." And I said, No, he's not.
That's what people say when they don't know.
I know. Yeah. Okay,
good
that's
point.
all I wanted to throw in it. So that other fella that called earlier.
Well, I appreciate you throwing that in.
Decide and look him up.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Pittman.
Hey.
Who do you think you are? Mr. Pitt. Never mind. So what's coming up on the show today?
Well, we're going to talk more about...
No, you're not going to do that.
Maura Healey.
What's wrong with her?
She's got no plan.
Yes, she does.
Well, she has a plan. She has policies that she puts in place and then wonders how she's going to pay for them.
That's a plan.
Yeah, it is, technically.
That's crazy.
And then we'll talk about Joe Biden's brother under oath admitting that Joe Biden did accept $40,000 from China while he was in office.
You can't believe that guy. All right, Kim Pittman coming up after ABC News at the top of the hour. I will be back again next Saturday. Ken, have a great show. No good football stuff to talk about. Darn.
I'm a draft nerd.